Hi there everyone, this is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, and I'm back from a much needed week off. But as you can tell by the title of this video, we've got a lot of really important information to cover today, so let's just jump right into it. Today we're going to take a look at this. The Pandora Papers, biggest ever leak of offshore data, exposes financial secrets of the rich and the powerful. Millions of documents reveal offshore deals and assets of more than 100 billionaires, 30 world leaders, and 300 public officials. So we're going to dive deep into that, guys. We're also going to take a look at this. Today's coronavirus news: Ontario reporting 511 new COVID-19 cases, and the EU regulator okays Pfizer's vaccine booster for 18 years and older. So we're now talking about boosters for 18 years and older in the EU. Well, that can't happen here, can it? Well, today we see this: BC to begin COVID-19 booster shots for long-term care assisted living residents. So in the EU, they're going for 18-year-olds and older. In BC, they're currently starting out with the long-term care living residents. And as we see here in Israel, nearly 2 million Israelis lose green pass as new rules enter into effect. Document granting access to certain venues for vaccinated and recovered, now only valid for 6 months after your last shot. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that means booster shots every 6 months for life. And we're also going to look at the biggest news of the day coming out of Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan issues new provincial emergency order to address labor mobility in the healthcare system. And here is the minister's order, guys. We are going to go over some of the most draconian aspects of this piece of legislation that would indeed make it appear that we're on the fast track to all-out martial law in this country. I mean, they're already incrementally rolling that idea out. We see now, as of today, military nurses to land in Alberta on Monday to ease healthcare strain from COVID-19. We've already seen this in places like Saskatchewan, in Ontario, in Quebec. In Quebec, military mission to COVID long-term care home cost the taxpayer around $53 million, and a whole bunch of people died there, and it still ended up costing everybody $53 million, guys. And the point we're going to make today is these guys cannot be trusted. I mean, we just had this out a few days ago from the National Post. Military leaders saw pandemic as a unique opportunity to test propaganda on Canadians, according to a new report. A plan devised by the Canadian Joint Operations Command relied on propaganda techniques similar to those employed during the Afghan War, ladies and gentlemen. In response to that National Post article, Eva Bartlett here from RT put this out: "It's utterly unacceptable that Canada's military ran a secret psyop campaign to manipulate and control the public's views on COVID." And as we see here, she says, Canadian journalist Dan Dix, who was among the first to report on and analyze the Wolf story, noted at the time that it was a classic example of a psychological operation. So we're going to look at all of that, guys, and much, much more in this video. But just before we do, I'd ask that you check us out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate. Here's where you can make a one-time donation with PayPal. You can contribute some Bitcoin if you're doing well in that space. If you're on Patreon, you can become a patron of mine by clicking on that banner there. You can contribute other cryptocurrencies as well by clicking there. Here you can sign up for a monthly reoccurring amount outside of Patreon. If you would rather do that, you can also send an e-transfer to dan@pressfortruth.ca. And if you're old school and you prefer to keep it that way, you can send cash, checks, equipment, simply just words of encouragement to my P.O. box. Links are all located in the description below, my friends. All right, so let's just jump right into this. Today we're going to start with this. The Pandora Papers, biggest ever leak of offshore data, exposes financial secrets of the rich and powerful. And I think you'll find I have a bit of a different take than most on the Panama Papers and the now subsequent Pandora Papers. It says here, the secret deals are hidden assets of some of the world's richest and most powerful people have been revealed in the biggest trove of leaked offshore data in history. Branded the Pandora Papers, the cache includes 11.9 million files from companies hired by wealthy clients to create offshore structures and trusts in tax havens such as Panama, Dubai, Monaco, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands. And it should be noted, ladies and gentlemen, I've looked into a bit of this, and the papers aren't fully released yet, but from what I can tell, for the most part, people who are being named in this are not violating any laws. They've simply found loopholes to be able to protect their assets from being taken from the government and being funneled into the military-industrial complex. What is so bad about that? I applaud people who figure out ways to be able to, within the legal system, use loopholes to essentially hide their money from the government, which is going to just steal it through taxation to funnel it into the military-industrial complex. Bravo! I can't wait for these papers to come out so I can learn from the pros. Let's continue. They exposed the secret offshore affairs of 35 world leaders, including current and former presidents, prime ministers, and heads of state. They also shine a light on the secret finances of more than 300 other public officials, such as government ministers, judges, mayors, military generals, in more than 90 countries, ladies and gentlemen. And what we're going to show you is that these 35 world leaders, the current former presidents, prime ministers, heads of state, as you will see, are going to turn out to be enemies of the state. This is exactly the point we made when the Panama Papers came out. As we explained, there were limited hangouts within that. Like back then, it was David Cameron. You see here, they have Tony Blair mixed into the mix, right, as part of the limited hangout. But guys, if you want to understand the Pandora Papers, you absolutely have to understand this. The Panama Papers, Key Bono, and this is a video I put out 5 years ago when this happened in 2016, where I point out that the main enemies of the Panama leaks were President of Iran, Bashar al-Assad. I mean, huge enemy of the West, somebody that they've been trying to get into his space for decades now. We have President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, on the chopping blocks, saying he's hiding massive amounts of money. And of course, we had the Premier of Iceland here, who, in case you didn't know, back in 2008, was the only one after the financial crisis to actually jail high elite banksters in his country. And these are the guys who were targeted by the Panama Papers. Guys, that should be a pretty clear sign to you that there are limited hangouts here. This is targeting enemies of the state who go against the status quo. And here, ladies and gentlemen, I followed it up with this. The Panama Papers 2.0, who's next? And I gotta say, guys, I put a lot of effort into this video. I made it like a documentary-styled video. I wrote a narration. I used B-roll and music. I compiled a very solid piece. And back then, 5 years ago, it only got a couple thousand views, which on my channel with a 250,000 is like nothing. Rarely got any views. But back then, this is me 5 years ago, after the Panama Papers, explaining that there's going to be more leaks to come. And I'm going to talk about who that's going to be, and more importantly, what this psyop is truly all about. So I want to air that one for you guys. It's only 4 minutes long. Again, I made this 5 years ago, explaining what the Panama Papers were about, but more importantly, what you can expect with the next leak. I didn't know at the time it'd be called Pandora, but here we are with exactly who's next. And this is the piece that I put out 5 years ago. Once again, exposing the Panama Papers and explaining what is to be expected with the upcoming Pandora Papers. Check this out, friends.
The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists is about to unleash a huge data dump about how some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people hide their cash. The ICIJ says it will be the largest ever release of information about secret offshore companies and the people behind them, based on data from the Panama Papers. But as we've covered here before, the Panama Papers were likely an inside job because of the nature of the leaks. Like Snowden and Assange's controlled leaks, the Panama Papers didn't actually put a dent into the actions of the Western elites. Of course, Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron was targeted, and as with Snowden, the NSA's surveillance was exposed. But any real threat to the status quo has been lacking, and it is likely this coming data dump by the ICIJ will target enemies of the West. Consider that intelligence agencies like the FBI have hired hackers to work for them. The last thing Western elites want are young hackers working for foreign governments or disrupting the status quo for their own personal reasons. If there was a real hack that did not involve controlled leaks, then we would likely get some 9/11 truth. Instead of having a trial by media for the Icelandic Prime Minister who stood up to the globalist banks, the world could learn about the Bush and Cheney connection to 9/11. If there are any real hackers out there who have yet to be compromised, there is a real goal worth striving for. While the Panama Papers do expose some actual criminals who deserve it, they also target honest businessmen just trying to hide their wealth from parasitical, tax-addicted governments. But what about shining a light on the truth behind 9/11? Or publishing the minutes of the Bilderberg meetings? A group of the world's wealthiest and most powerful meeting behind closed doors, with media, but off record. Is that not worth exposing? Instead of exposing Jose Soria and Prime Minister David Gunlausen, how about David Rockefeller and Jacob Rothschild? Why not go after the real criminals of this new world order? Although the Panama Papers, as well as Snowden and Assange's leaks, include limited hangouts of truth, there is common sense in being weary of information that does not go right to the source. Where did this information come from? What parties are they funded by? And do they have their own agenda? We here at Press for Truth call on all the real hackers out there who have not been bought, have not sold out, and are not working for the enemy to join us in our cause to shine a light on the true cockroaches of this fascist system.
And there you have it, folks. That's how I feel about what's going on there. If you didn't see the first one, Panama Papers, Key Bono, and any of my other coverage on that, I did a couple of videos on that. Links to all of that are going to be located in the description below, guys. But I just wanted to point that out to you today because it got relatively no views, and I thought it was a pretty solid piece. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. All right, guys, we're going to look at this. EU regulators are okaying Pfizer vaccine booster shots for 18 years or older now. The latest coronavirus news from Canada and around the world on Monday. The file will be updated throughout the day. So basically, this goes on. It shows a huge timeline of what's been going on, and it mentions, as you can tell, links to all these sources are going to be located in the description below. But as you can see, EU regulators are okaying the Pfizer vaccine booster for 18-year-olds and older. Now, this is something we've been talking about for quite some time on this channel. That there would be these booster shots coming, that they would essentially set up a passive income on your immune system. I said that quite a while ago. And now we're seeing the incremental moves towards that. But in EU, it's for 18-year-olds, and in British Columbia, it's for long-term care assisted living residents. As we see here, British Columbians living in long-term care and assisted living homes are due to start receiving COVID-19 booster shots this week. Health officials say they are offering boosters because of the risks of living in group settings and the fact that older people are shown not to develop as strong of an antibody response to their first 2 vaccine doses. So how are we figuring this stuff is working when they're now starting out in the elderly saying, the 2 doses aren't really working, we're going to need a 3rd now. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry has said the latest data shows a 3rd dose is most effective, what's this? About 6 months after the 2nd one. Those eligible will be getting their extra jabs along with the influenza shots. This is just insane. But look at the language. 6 months after the 2nd. That's important to remember, guys, when we look at what's happening in Israel, which is the blueprint for what you will be eventually seeing in Canada. Nearly 2 million Israelis lose Green Pass as new rules enter effect. The new Green Pass rules took effect on Sunday, with nearly 2 million Israelis losing their passes under the updated immunity guidelines due to not being vaccinated with a COVID-19 booster shot. Just unbelievable. Starting on Sunday, the Green Pass will be valid for just 6 months after a person's last vaccine shot, a change in policy that will affect around almost 2 million Israelis, according to the Hebrew media. So, your Green Pass will be valid for 6 months after a person's last vaccine shot. So, what that means is you've done all the proper things. You are now in the green. Yay, I can get access to society. I can go to the restaurants and the bars and the events, and all of a sudden, bloop, it goes red. And you say, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Every 6 months, you're going to have to get a booster in order to get back into the green, in order to be able to get access to society. And as I said, they're setting up a passive income eventually on your immune system, forcing, not forcing, it's not mandatory, but essentially de facto forcing you to get it every 6 months if you want to take part in society. And as we've said constantly on this channel, guys, right now it's not essentials, but eventually it will be the essentials. You will soon eventually have to show this in order to get into the grocery stores. And when that day comes, guys, all hell is going to break loose. But we'll cross that bridge when it gets there. All existing green passes will be voided, and all Israelis must receive new ones through the health minister's website or the app. The new passes become available on Saturday night after midnight. The new rules also require those who recovered from COVID-19 to get one vaccine dose to be eligible for the Green Pass. The pass is only valid starting 1 week after receiving the last required dose for 6 months. The document held by those who are vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19 grants access to many public places and events, including restaurants and museums. Yay! A temporary Green Pass can also be obtained through a negative virus test, which must be paid for unless the individual is not eligible for vaccination. The first country, Israel, to officially offer a third dose began its COVID-19 booster campaign on August 1st, initially rolling it out to those over the age of 60. It then gradually dropped the eligibility age, eventually expanding it to everyone over 12 and up who received the second shot at least 5 months ago. Do you see how that works, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, here in British Columbia, don't worry. It's only starting with the long-term care assisted living residents who need the booster shots. Well, look over here in Israel, guys. They initially rolled it out to those over the age of 60, but then gradually they dropped the eligible age to anybody over the age of 12. If you don't think that's coming here to Canada, ladies and gentlemen, you are absolutely going to be shockingly mistaken. All right, guys, let's jump on to the biggest news of the day. Saskatchewan issues this healthcare order, the order to the healthcare system. Here it is, Minister's Order, Province of Saskatchewan, by order of the Lieutenant Governor and Council. A declaration of emergency has been made for the province of Saskatchewan to address the COVID-19 public health emergency. So let's dive into it, guys. As I said, this is some of the most draconian pieces of legislation I have seen to date, which clearly is leading the country towards a potential martial law type scenario. Powers of the Minister in an Emergency, 18.1. On the making of an emergency declaration or the renewal of an emergency declaration and during the emergency period, the Minister may, A, put into operation any emergency plan or program that the Minister considers appropriate. Well, that's pretty vague. That's pretty vague right there off the top, 18.1a. Any operation and any emergency plan that the Minister considers appropriate. Okay, that gives him quite a bit of leeway. Authorize or require a local authority to put into effect any emergency plan for the municipality as well. C, assume direction and control of the new emergency response of a local authority. If they don't like what their police are doing and not really following it properly, they can just come in, take it over. D, acquire or utilize any real or personal property that the Minister considers necessary to prevent, combat, or alleviate the effects of an emergency. Guys, this is where we're venturing into the territory of just a tyrannical nightmare. Acquire or utilize any real or personal property that they think is necessary to prevent or combat this. So let's say, for example, you own, a warehouse or a factory or a big stadium or something, and they determine that we're going to need to use that as a quarantine facility because you're in the right area and we don't have one, and we're just going to seize it and use it. They can do that under this order. In fact, there's probably far more worse things that can be done when it comes to this language. Utilize personal property in any way necessary to combat the effects of an emergency. E, authorize any qualified person to render aid of a type that the person is qualified to provide. Control or prohibit travel to or from any area of Saskatchewan. Are you kidding me? 18F, control or prohibit travel to and from any area. So under this emergency order, you can't move anywhere. You can't go from A to B. If they want to stop you in your tracks, they will do that. That's not freedom, guys. We know this has nothing to do with health. It has everything to do with control. Let's continue as this gets even crazier. Provide for the restoration of essential facilities and the distribution of essential supplies. Provide, maintain, and coordinate emergency medical welfare, law enforcement, and other essential services in any part of Saskatchewan. And here's where it gets crazy, guys. I, cause the evacuation of persons and the removal of persons or livestock and personal property from any area of Saskatchewan that is or may be affected by an emergency, and make arrangements for the adequate care and protection of those persons or livestock and the personal property. Let's look at that again. Cause the evacuation of persons and the removal of persons or livestock and personal property from any area that may be affected. Essentially saying we can take you out of your home, we can even take your livestock, and we can ship that, as they say here, to somewhere that's going to make arrangements for adequate care and protection of those persons and livestock and their personal property. Really? Adequate? Like those quarantine camps? Like the quarantine hotels that the government is being very secretively running here, as I recently exposed? If you haven't seen that video, guys, go check it out. I think I titled it Police and Pacific Gate Hotel Set Up Dan Dix Fined $2,000 under the Quarantine Act. It's absolutely unbelievable what happened to me there, guys. Links for that video are going to be located in the description below, guys, if you haven't seen it. But yeah, we can't trust these facilities that they're going to be relocating people from their private property with their livestock into these places. This is so draconian. This is the stepping tiptoes towards all-out martial law. Let's continue. J, authorize the entry into any building or any land without warrant by any person in the course of implementing an emergency plan. I mean, that's just about as martial law as you can get. Authorizing the entry into any building or any land without warrant is the key words there, without warrant. So they can now do this because they say so, all under the guise of an emergency. A virus with a 99.97% recovery rate is an emergency, folks. K, cause the demolition or the removal of any trees, structures, or crops if the demolition or removal is necessary or appropriate in order to reach the scene of emergency, to attempt to forestall its occurrence or to combat its progress. Folks, this is literally talking about destroying crops and eventually livestock. Have you seen the stories of, cats and dogs having COVID, or people finding coronaviruses in different fruits and vegetables? I'm not making this stuff up. It's out there, guys. Go look for it. This order seems to say they will be able to destroy certain things of that nature in order to forestall its occurrence, to combat its progress. L, procure or fix prices for food, clothing, fuel, equipment, medical supplies, or other essential supplies, and the use of any property, services, resources, or equipment within any part of Saskatchewan during the emergency period. Oh wait, how long is that period? Not really discussed yet. Is it going to be extended into the near future? You better believe it, folks. Not only that, it's going to be expanded beyond Saskatchewan into all provinces in Canada. That's the endgame agenda here, is to eventually have military taking over the places of these nurses, essentially, who are, as we know, leaving because they're being forced to be vaccinated and they're being fired. Guys, this is just unbelievably draconian legislation here that, as I said, is leading towards all-out martial law. Links to all of this are going to be located in the description below. We have to understand the incremental moves that they make towards this. I know people are going to say, Dan, relax. They're just sending a couple of nurses here to aid in the help in the ICUs in the hospitals here. Well, guys, it's not because they're overwhelmed in the hospitals that they need help. It's because nurses are being fired for not taking the vaccine. Nurses are being fired for simply questioning a forced medical procedure. And now they're sending in the military to replace these women and men who are not going to question the orders, who are going to take the vax no matter what, and who are going to forcefully, eventually, stick it into people's arms. Military medical personnel are expected to arrive in Alberta Monday to help ease the strain on hospitals caused by COVID-19, the federal government announced on Saturday. The Canadian Armed Forces is preparing to send up to 8 critical care nurses to help in the province's intensive care units. Where and how the nurses will be integrated into the healthcare system still needs to be confirmed, but the initial team is expected to arrive today, October 4th, a news release has said. We're always ready to help Canadians cross-country during difficult times. This pandemic has been no different. And as we pointed out before, I've shown you how they've been conditioning people with the idea of starting to see military a little more in the streets. We had that one day that they were just parading around in the streets, and I documented the whole thing, showing how it's just conditioning the minds of the masses to get used to such a thing. Well, we're seeing similarities. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario had these deployed, and let's not forget Quebec, which cost the taxpayer $53 million, and it didn't really seem to help anything. A whole bunch of people died anyways, and here's the point we were going to make earlier, guys, that they simply cannot be trusted, as has been exposed in this National Post article, but they didn't really fully expose it. I mean, after all, this is the National Post. I'll leave a description to this in the link in the description below, a link to this if you want to check it out for yourself. But I want to take a look at Eva Bartlett's response to the National Post article because she does a great job here. So it says, the plan devised by the Canadian Joint Operations Command relied on propaganda techniques like those used during the Afghan War. What on earth is going on in the upper echelons of Ottawa? High up elements of the Canadian forces have been waging psychological operations on the public over COVID-19 to manipulate their emotions and their thoughts and to gauge their reactions. While this is not uncommon around the world, getting caught is. A new article in the National Post states that the Canadian Joint Operations Command used propaganda techniques similar to those employed during the Afghan War on the Canadian public. The Post cites a December 2020 investigation by retired General Daniel Gosselin, who was asked to look into it by the then Chief of Defense Staff General John Vance. According to the article, federal government was innocent and not aware of the plan, a claim I found unbelievable considering the amount of gaslighting and knowingly pointless regulations the government has subjected Canadians to since the start of the pandemic scare. The plan involving shaping and exploiting information, the Post noted, to head off civil disobedience by Canadians and to bolster government message about the pandemic. And among the stranger aspects was scaring Canadians with stories of a wolf invasion. This, according to the Post, involved Canadian Forces military, information operations staff forging a letter from the Canadian government warning about wolves on the loose in September. The Post claims the letter's release was inadvertent and basically ran with the Canadian Forces claim that this was just down to a few bad apples, reservists who had lacked formal training and policy governing to use propaganda techniques. However, Canadian journalist Dan Dix, who was among the first to report and analyze the wolf story, noted at the time that this was a classic example of a psychological operation. Dix also pointed out what the National Post admitted, highlighting that they created a fake letter from the government saying there are dangerous wolves, and they set up loudspeakers in the area projecting out wolf noises. This isn't just research. This isn't just a training exercise. They are actively engaging in this psychological operation to scare people using loudspeakers. Psyops, he noted, is a term used to denote any action which is practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of evoking a planned psychological reaction in other people. And they are aimed at influencing a target audience's value systems, belief systems, emotions, motives, reasonings, or behavior. Canadian journalist James Corbett likewise commented on this at the time, pointing out how a rumor is floated to see how the public will react. This entire coordinated campaign to convince an entire public of a threat that doesn't exist in order to test how they will react to that? What will the public respond to and how will they respond? Well, that really speaks volumes to the world we are living in. And if you really think they're going to do all that, but they're never going to use that for nefarious purposes, fantastic point by our friend James Corbett at thecorbettreport.com, guys. Here is the piece that I put out back in October of 2020, Canadian military fake wolves fear campaign exposed, but you won't believe what they are doing next. And here we are, guys. Saskatchewan puts out their minister order. All out martial law, it looks like we're in the run-up to here in this country, guys. Absolutely shocking and unbelievable information that we've had to cover for you here today, guys. Once again, don't forget to check out the links in the description below to get, more in-depth on all of this information. If you want to just look at the sources today's video, check out the links in the description. If you want to follow up on the videos I've made previously about the Panama Papers, you can follow up on that there, guys. I want to remind you, if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this information, please check us out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate. We need all the help we can get, guys. As I said, I'm under attack right now. I'm facing court very soon. I have to pay $2,000 in fines for allegedly breaching a COVID-1984 quarantine facility. I will be taking the courts on. I will be challenging that ticket, and I'm going to need your help in that battle, guys. I really do. If you want to support my efforts to be there on the front lines, putting myself out there on the front lines and continue to bring you this daily information, once again, please don't forget to check us out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate. Any and everything is greatly appreciated, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who has contributed. It's because of you that we're able to continue here at Press for Truth. So that's all for today, guys. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this video if you found the information to be useful. And stay tuned. We're going to have more video reports coming soon. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.